What if everything you've been told about genius is wrong? What if the very things that make you an outsider are the keys to unlocking your greatest potential? This is the story of a boy who shouldn't have become a legend. Born in 1452 in the tiny village of Unciano, Leonardo da Vinci entered the world with 3 strikes against him. He was illegitimate, left-handed, and he received no formal education. In Renaissance Italy, any one of these should have condemned him to obscurity. But Leonardo had a secret weapon, what others saw as flaws. He would transform into his greatest strengths. His illegitimate status was his first lucky break. Because he was born out of wedlock, he couldn't follow his father as a notary. He escaped the boring, respectable future that awaited legitimate sons. Instead of being trapped in a stuffy office, his mind remained free to wander, to question, to explore. While other children memorized Latin grammar, Leonardo attended what was called an abacus school. This wasn't about theoretical mathematics. It was the math of the real world. The mathematics of engineers and merchants and builders. He learned how to calculate the strength of materials, the flow of water, the perspective in a drawing. This practical knowledge would become the foundation of everything he would later create. Then there was his handwriting. Being left-handed in a right-handed world, Leonardo faced a practical problem. His hand would smudge the ink as he wrote. So he engineered a brilliant solution. He wrote backwards, from right to left, in perfect mirror script. What looked like a secret code was actually just practical problem solving. This pattern of turning weaknesses into strengths defined his entire life. When educated scholars mocked him for his poor Latin and lack of classical education, Leonardo didn't try to become like them. He dismissed them as foolish folk and declared, "Though I cannot quote from authors as they do, I shall rely on a far more worthy thing, on experience." While they were debating ancient texts in dusty libraries, Leonardo was outside observing how light falls on leaves, how water flows in a stream, how birds fly through the air. He was getting his education not from books, but from the world itself. At age 14, his father arranged an apprenticeship with the famous artist Andrea del Verrocchio. This wasn't an art school, it was a creative laboratory where Leonardo learned to merge his practical mind with artistic genius. He quickly began surpassing his teacher. In Verrocchio's The Baptism of Christ, look at the 2 angels. The one on the left, painted by young Leonardo, seems alive, her face soft and mysterious, emerging from the shadows. The one on the right, by Verrocchio himself, looks stiff and carved by comparison. Leonardo was already developing his signature sfumato technique, the art of soft, smoky blending that would later make the Mona Lisa so magical. In another painting, Tobias and the Angel, Leonardo painted the fish that Tobias carries. While everything else in the painting looks flat and decorative, his fish gleams with wet, slimy life. He painted a dog so full of energy it seems ready to leap off the canvas. What was his secret? He wasn't just copying what he saw, he was understanding it. He was already thinking like a scientist who paints, studying the essential nature of things. So by his 20s, the pattern was set. the illegitimate son was free from tradition. The left-hander had invented his own way of thinking. The uneducated apprentice was outshining his master by relying on direct observation rather than received wisdom. He had turned every supposed disadvantage into his greatest strength. But Florence was becoming too small for his expanding mind. He needed a bigger stage, a greater challenge. His journey was about to take him north, to Milan, where his relentless curiosity would lead him to peer into the most terrifying and beautiful subject of all, the human body itself. What is the price of genius? What would you be willing to do to see what no one else has seen? To know what no one else knows? For Leonardo da Vinci, the answer was clear. He was willing to descend into the darkness, into the charnel houses and the mortuaries, lit only by flickering candlelight. He was willing to spend his nights with the dead, peeling back the layers of the human body, in a quest to find the very source of life and of art. He believed that to paint the ultimate mystery, the human soul, you first had to map its physical vessel. This is the story of how Leonardo da Vinci became a grave robber, a dissector, and in doing so, unlocked the secrets that would make his art immortal. Imagine the scene. It's the dead of night in a hospital in Milan or Rome. The air is thick with the smell of incense and decay. And here is Leonardo, the famous artist, bending over a corpse. He wasn't a doctor. He had no formal training. He was driven by a raw, insatiable need to see. He dissected roughly 30 corpses over his lifetime. Men, women, an old man who claimed to be 100, even a fetus in the womb. This was dangerous, illegal, and considered sacrilegious work. He wrote of having to work quickly before decay set in. He faced not just the horror of it, but the overwhelming stench. But look at what came from this grisly labor, this drawing of a skull. It's not just a surface sketch. He sawed it in half. He was the first to accurately draw the frontal sinus, the hollow space behind your eyebrows. He was mapping the architecture of the human head like an engineer. And this wasn't just for science. This knowledge went straight onto his canvas. To paint that famous smile, he needed to know every single nerve and muscle that controlled the lips. The Mona Lisa's smile isn't just a curve of paint. It's the culmination of countless hours spent studying the facial nerves of corpses. He was literally painting from the inside out. But Leonardo wasn't just interested in the parts. He was obsessed with the whole, the perfect, divine proportions of the human body. And this obsession produced one of the most iconic images in the world, the Vitruvian Man. But most people don't realize what they're looking at. This isn't just a fit man in two poses. This is a cosmic blueprint, a mathematical manifesto. Leonardo was inspired by an ancient Roman architect named Vitruvius, who said the human body could fit perfectly in a circle and a square. Others had tried to draw it, but their versions were clumsy. The math didn't work. Leonardo was the one who made it perfect. Why? Because he was both the artist and the scientist. He used his anatomical knowledge to get the muscles and form exactly right, and his mathematical mind from the abacus school to solve the geometric puzzle. The navel is the true center of the circle. The outstretched limbs define the square. This was Leonardo's grand belief. The same God-given proportions that govern our bodies should govern our temples, our palaces, our cities. The Vitruvian Man was his proof that art, science, and God were all part of one unified, beautiful system. And his greatest anatomical triumph was yet to come. He became fascinated by the engine of life itself, the human heart. Remember, at this time, doctors still relied on ideas from ancient Greece. But Leonardo, with his scalpel and his own eyes, discovered truths that medicine wouldn't confirm for centuries. He declared the heart was a muscle, not a mystical vessel. He suggested that arteries harden as we age. And his most brilliant discovery, he figured out how the aortic valve closes. By studying the flow of water, he saw how swirling currents, little vortices, would naturally push the valve's flaps shut. He used his knowledge of hydrodynamics to solve a biological mystery. This is the quintessential Leonardo moment. One field of study illuminating another. He even made a glass model of an aorta to test his theory. He was not just observing, he was experimenting. He was building the very foundation of modern scientific method, centuries before it became standard practice. So, from the darkness of the dissection table, Leonardo brought forth light. He discovered the hidden laws of the human body. He gave us the Vitruvian Man, a map of our own perfect proportions. He unraveled the mysteries of the beating heart, and he poured all of it, every nerve, every proportion, every subtle shadow of living tissue, into his art. The shock on the faces of the apostles in the Last Supper, the knowing gaze of the Mona Lisa. This isn't just artistic talent. This is anatomical truth. But Leonardo's mind wasn't content with just understanding the world of flesh and blood. He now wanted to reshape the world itself, to conquer the elements, to build the impossible. The world of flesh and blood was not enough. Leonardo had unraveled the secrets of the human body, but his mind was already soaring higher, digging deeper, reaching further. He looked at the world around him and saw not a fixed creation, but a series of engineering problems waiting to be solved. He wanted to conquer the elements themselves. This was the birth of Leonardo the engineer, the visionary whose dreams were so vast, they were centuries ahead of their time. And it all began with a simple yet profound observation. Look to the birds. For decades, Leonardo studied flight with an intensity no one had ever applied before. He didn't just watch birds, he dissected them. He calculated the surface area of their wings. He noted in his journals, with breathtaking precision, that some birds move their wings more swiftly when they lower them than when they raise them. He was decoding the very algorithm of flight. And then he designed a machine to replicate it. The ornithopter, a breathtaking contraption of wood, cloth, and leather, designed to flap its wings like a bird. It was a conceptual masterpiece, a proof of concept that humans could, in theory, achieve flight through mechanical means. He was dreaming of the sky, and he was building a ladder to reach it. But his imagination didn't stop there. He sketched a device called the aerial screw. Imagine a giant spinning linen helix designed to bore its way into the air and lift a platform off the ground. It was the earliest conceptual ancestor of the helicopter. It was a leap of imagination so bold, it was almost science fiction. But here lies the tragedy of Leonardo the engineer. The 15th century simply did not have the materials, the engines, or the power source to make his flying machines a reality. His genius was trapped by the technology of his time. He was a prophet, with visions of airplanes and helicopters, born into a world of wood and gunpowder. Yet, in other areas, his engineering genius had an immediate and devastating impact. Take his work for the ruthless Cesare Borgia. Leonardo, the man who painted the Serenity of the Madonna, now designed brutal war machines, tanks, rapid-firing cannons, and colossal crossbows. But his most significant contribution to Borgia's campaign wasn't a weapon. It was a map. At the time, maps were largely symbolic, more art than science. But Leonardo's map of the town of Imola was a revolution. Using a magnetic compass and his mastery of geometry, he created a planimetrically accurate map, a god's eye view that was so precise it was practically a satellite image drawn by hand. For the first time, a military commander could look at a map and not just see a drawing, but see the terrain. He could plan attacks, identify weak points, and position troops with a terrifying new level of strategy. With that single map, Leonardo didn't just help Borgia. He invented the very principles of modern cartography. And then there was his most ambitious earthly project, a machine to move a river. He sought to defeat Florence's enemy, Pisa, not with armies, but with hydrology. He designed a colossal machine capable of moving 1 million tons of earth to divert the Arno River and cut Pisa off from the sea. It was a plan of breathtaking scale and audacity. But like his flying machines, it was never completed. This was the pattern: the horse, the flying machines, the river. So many of his grandest visions remained on paper. He was a dreamer, constantly frustrated by the limitations of reality, by politics, by war, by a world that wasn't quite ready for him. He saw the future, but he was doomed to live in the present. Yet, in that frustration, we find his ultimate lesson. It wasn't about successfully building a helicopter. It was about having the courage to imagine it in the first place. It was about the relentless curiosity that asked, what if we could fly? And then spent a lifetime trying to find the answer. His greatest engineering marvel wasn't a single machine. It was the engine of his own mind, an imagination without limits. And it was this same boundless mind that would now turn inward, facing the final and most profound mystery of all. The mystery of life, death, and the creation of a single painting that would captivate the world for centuries. He had conquered the human form. He had blueprinted the future. Now, in the final chapter of his life, Leonardo da Vinci turned to his ultimate masterpiece, a painting he would carry with him for years, never delivering it to a client, forever refining it. A portrait of a woman with a smile that the world would never forget. This was no longer just a commission. This was an obsession. The Mona Lisa is not merely a painting. It is a destination, the culmination of a lifetime of learning. a grand finale where every one of Leonardo's passions converged on a single piece of poplar wood. His scientific dissections gave him the knowledge to craft her smile. Every subtle muscle, every nerve he had traced in the dissection room, now came to life in the gentle curve of her lips. He painted from the inside out, and that is why her expression feels so real, so fleeting, so alive. His mastery of light, learned from studying optics and the way light caresses curved surfaces, allowed him to create the signature technique that defines her, sfumato. It means gone up in smoke, and that's what he did. He dissolved all harsh lines into soft, smoky transitions between light and shadow. Look at her face. There are no edges. She seems to breathe, enveloped in a hazy, dreamlike atmosphere. This wasn't a style. It was sorcery, built on a scientist's understanding of the physical world. And then there are her eyes. Leonardo believed the eye was the window to the soul, and he built those windows with meticulous precision. He carefully modeled the shadows around her sockets, giving them an unparalleled depth. And he painted them to look directly at you, because the perspective in a two-dimensional portrait is fixed. No matter where you stand in the room, her gaze finds you. She doesn't just look out of the painting, she connects with you, holding you in a silent, timeless conversation. But the greatest magic lies in her smile. It is a psychological illusion, a trick of perception that Leonardo engineered. When you look directly at her mouth, the fine details and subtle shading make the smile seem soft, almost non-existent. But try this. Look away. Focus on her eyes, or the background. In your peripheral vision, where you perceive broader shapes and contrasts, her smile widens. It becomes more pronounced. It's a smile that exists not on the canvas, but in your mind. Leonardo didn't just paint a smile, he painted the very idea of a smile, and he let your own brain complete the picture. Compare her to one of his earlier portraits, the Ginevra da Vinci. It is a beautiful painting, yes, but it is static. The face is a mask. It lacks the inner life, the psychological depth, the breathtaking technical sophistication of the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is the work of a master who has spent a lifetime merging art and science into one inseparable whole. He kept her with him until the very end, in his final home in France, a guest of King Francis I. And as his life drew to a close, his mind, ever restless, turned to one final powerful force, the destructive power of water. His deluge drawings are not like his earlier studies. They are apocalyptic, chaotic, terrifying. They show waves crashing into mountains, whirlpools swallowing cities, the world dissolving into a furious, overwhelming force. These are the visions of an old man facing his own mortality, contemplating the ultimate power of nature that even he could not control. Leonardo da Vinci died on May 2nd, 1519, and in his will, a final poignant detail. This man, who had relied on experience above all, who had peered into the very fabric of life and matter, wrote, "First he commends his soul to our Lord, Almighty God, and to the glorious Virgin Mary." So, what is his true legacy? It is not just the paintings, the drawings, the inventions. It is the formula he lived by. A formula of boundless curiosity, a relentless drive to observe the ordinary until it revealed its extraordinary secrets. A belief that the world is one interconnected system, and that art and science are not enemies, but two different languages describing the same beautiful, profound truth. He was the living proof that the most powerful tool in the universe is a questioning